Podcasters Roundtable round 144. You can't tweet your way to a #1 podcast. Or can you? I don't know. We're going to find out. But welcome back, everyone. Hope everyone is safe and doing well. And we have a good little lineup for you today. And in fact, a new roundtabler. And what is so cool is that our new roundtabler answered the call that I put out on the last roundtable for more women. And so if you're a woman and you're listening to the roundtable, we need you to submit, because as you can look at this roundtable, we do not represent podcasting well enough. In fact, if you are anything international, non-white woman, everyone, please submit so that the roundtable can be actually what the podcasting space looks like, much more diverse. We're a big anchor over here in the co-host and host department, but so happy. Effie, welcome to your first roundtable.
Hey guys, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I heard if you're a female, get in touch with us, and I just thought I can do that. I'm one of those. I'm in. So I'm bringing the lady today.
That's right. And it shot Effie right to the top of the list. I saw that come in. And you know what? I will say, I saw like at least 2 more come in. So I'm very excited.
Cool.
It's working. So more call to action, podcastersroundtable.com/guest. That's where, whoever wants to submit, obviously, if you're a dude, go ahead. We need the pool to pull from. Pool to pool. That's a tricky one. All right, Dave Jackson, co-host, welcome back.
Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com. And Effie, you forgot to tell us where we can find your podcast.
Hi, yes. You can find my podcast at effieparks.com. I'm also on all the platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify. I'm the host of Once Upon a Gene. It's a podcast centered around rare disease and disability.
And your podcast, the website itself looks great. Like that, it's not, I check out every podcast website of someone who submits. First of all, I'm checking to see if it exists, right? Because sometimes people submit and you know how it goes. Podcasts don't make it that long and there's a spider. And then like a month or 2 later, the podcast doesn't exist. And so the website is down. But I went to yours and it looks great. So you've done a great job. And your podcast sounds great. I mean, if you're not watching on video, I'm going to put Effie full screen here as I say this. You should check it out because she's in basically in an actual like studio. It's a house studio, but it looks so cool. And she's got the lighting.
Cool.
Yeah, she sounds great. So killing it on the setup. A lot of guitars back there. Dave's drooling right now.
So. I am. I'm like,
Dave, that's
it's pretty cool. And thank you for saying that. I have some amazing help. If I can shout out my girls, Devana and Erica at modpod.studio. They have helped me so much with my podcast. And the reason my website looks so good is just a big thanks to them. And my friends London and Jonathan at Ball of the Above. They've all helped me out so much.
That's really cool. And I, make special note that you are talking into an ATR 2100. The 3 of us are talking into $300 plus microphones, and yours sounds on par, if not better. So yeah. This should be an example to anyone who's watching this. If you're new, if you're looking for gear, like you're not limited by budget. The ATR 2100. Very cool. Daniel J. Lewis, welcome back. Sorry, co-host.
Thank you. From the Audacity to Podcast.com with new episodes coming out and already in the feed and coming out again soon.
Very cool. All right. Well, let's start diving into some topics. I teased it with saying you can't tweet your way to the top, essentially. So, Effie, why don't you tell us what this article is about?
Well, you guys actually didn't write anything on the Google Doc. That I saw. Effie was the only one who did her homework, unless it didn't update.
Dave put one. Dave put one.
I don't know if you did, Dave. I looked before I even got on here, and there was still nothing in there.
Weird.
But I will go find it.
So the title was "Social Media Alone is Not the Way to Grow an Audience."
Oh, I put that one on there.
Yes,
that's the one I put on there.
Yes, I opened with yours.
Okay, so I wasn't a part of Twitter at all before podcasting, so I'm really new to it. I'm still learning it. I've had kind of a tough time really figuring out Twitter so much, so I have a lot of work to do there. I don't really get a lot of responses to my tweets when I post a new episode. I'm not sure if it's the hashtag game or if I'm supposed to be leaving more information in the comments. a lot of my rare disease people, the network that has found me is all on Twitter, which is cool. I didn't know they were there, but I'm not necessarily feeling like my podcast is, uh, filtering out so much on Twitter specifically.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could mini consulting session here from people. Like, I think
Yeah,
there's some
snag that.
important things to say there, right? You mentioned hashtag, but you also mentioned that your community is there. So, I mean, the key really is probably more so, I would say, interacting in that community on a conversational basis, even more so than, you said you're new to Twitter and before your podcast. So you probably don't have a big following and it's a fast moving river, right? So you put out a tweet and it doesn't really land. People, it's not translating into necessarily people going to the podcast or commenting on that tweet. And I think there's a good line in this article that I'm gonna read, because you said that your main takeaway is that it's a mistake to assume that social engagement is the key to growing your audience. And you said that was news to you, which I thought was interesting because, as you said before you had a podcast, you weren't on Twitter. So you had the idea that I got a podcast, I have to social promote. This is the way to grow, right?
Correct. I thought that the second I got my podcast out, if I wanted anyone to find me, I had to be active on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I know there's other things I haven't really played with too much, like LinkedIn and Reddit, and so on. Slowly like learning where I should be and how much in each neighborhood I should be in. But I knew I had to be online and I had to meet, people in the rare disease community, find families, find other patients, find people like me. And social media was obviously the only way I knew how to find them. So I knew I needed to like be on it and be active. But this article kind of surprised me because it was almost saying like maybe word of mouth is more valuable, which I do appreciate word of mouth 100%. It just surprised me that might, you know, cap it more so than just tweeting and, commenting on social media posts.
So a line from the article that I really liked, I highlighted, it said, the problem, most social users do not click through on social to actually listen to the episode. That's your problem, right? You're posting it, people aren't clicking through. And I would say this is a common experience. And the author, Tim O'Brien, this is from Podcast Business Journal. He says the issue wasn't whether they listened to podcasts or not. It was that when they saw the social media post, while they were very willing to share it because it may do well, they were not ready and willing to listen at that time. And so he goes on to talk about how it's more important to catch people, where they're maybe already doing listening. So, the community, you've kind of found out where they are, or you're finding that out. I'm sure there's other podcasts in that community. Much more valuable way to spend your time would be interacting with those podcasts, probably, or being on a podcast or having those people on your podcast. So then they promote to their audience, right? So,
Right.
a lack of having a really big following is where it's gonna start. But the whole key that people just are not in a place to listen to podcasts when they're on social, right? A viral video or even a video we have to share that's 30 seconds long, easy to click through, people watch TikTok, YouTube, whatever. They don't go from scrolling Twitter to listening to an hour-long podcast. And the question is, do they come back, right? And a few people will. And I think there's still value in doing it, but I think a lot of people are surprised. Man, I just keep pushing this out and it's not bringing in new people. What do you guys say?
I've got some data to reference in general, not specifics on this. For a while, a couple years ago, I used to use the tool Social Jukebox, and I would load up a tweet with my latest episodes, my timeless episodes, and then it would recycle those, cycling through. I think I had 200 episodes at one point total in that queue, and it would publish only 2 per day, and it would just go through this cycle of them. So they were all timeless content, and links looked good, had the proper Twitter cards, all of that stuff. And the titles and hashtags I would use, I would always make sure that those worked on a social network. So it's not just saying, listen to episode 5, but it was the title of the episode or something compelling. And I tracked how many people were clicking through those links. So 2 links per day. I have currently 9,800 followers on Twitter. Back then, I probably had maybe 8,800. So 9,000, that's just a guess. So those 9,000 people seeing me on Twitter, air quotes around that, I got 6 to 8 clicks per day through those links. That was it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's shocking.
It was, yeah. And I don't pay for that service as much as I liked that service. And I think there's a good place for a service like that, reposting, recycling content on social. It wasn't working for me. Now, that could be for all kinds of reasons. So my data does not indicate the way that the internet really works. It could just be everyone who follows me. I mean, theoretically, I could say everyone who follows me already listens to my podcast. And so therefore they have no interest in even clicking through this, or anyone who follows me is aware of my podcast and they don't necessarily make a decision to listen or not listen based on a tweet. But I think it's really about the lifespan of a tweet. And also, I mean, besides that, which that alone is a big thing, or actually rather a very little thing. But it's also, like Tim was saying in the article, the context. I don't actually watch Twitter anymore. It's very rare that my Twitter app is open and new tweets are coming in. I don't know. What about you guys? And Gal? Just to be all inclusive there.
Well,
Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I mean, for me, I've always thought Twitter alerts your audience that you already have that there's a new episode. I know that happens to me a lot because I've got 200 and some episodes here waiting for me to listen. And if I see a good headline, I'm like, oh, Monica has a new episode out. I'll go listen to that. And it's already on my phone. It's just letting me know. So I think it works in that way. And then if you are constantly building your social, then the new people are going to go, oh, they have a podcast? I didn't know that. And those people might click. But I think Daniel hit the nail on the head, or maybe it was Ray. The true thing is when you get somebody else to then retweet that. I don't think that's still going to bring in a giant number of people, but that is more or less word of mouth on Twitter is when somebody retweets it.
Right.
So,
And then Tim says the bottom line is, and you hit on this, Dave, this is exactly what you're saying. The bottom line is social media is a great way to keep your podcast top of mind and generate awareness, but it's a mistake to assume that social engagement is the key to growing your audience.
yeah, I would agree with that.
Well, wait, is it? Is it a mistake? Social engagement.
I think, but insert the word key. Like that is the key.
The key.
Socially,
right.
yeah, it's not the key.
It's a key.
It's a component.
But like what I see with that data that I mentioned was no engagement, practically no engagement, very little engagement. Now, if that was significantly higher, then maybe my podcast would grow more and, dare I say, in this world's context, become more viral. Maybe.
I mean, I would say too that you got to consider the type of post. Like, it's not a post that begs engagement. Like, you could see it like at the best that you can hope for. And Lipson is really good. Elsie's really good at doing tweets. And the way they work for me, and obviously just the way I use it, I see it just like this is saying, it's a mental reminder, or it alerts me to something. What she does, which is very good, is she exposes through multiple tweets all the different topics.
Mm-hmm.
So I may see the same episode tweeted 3 times, but it wasn't until the third one where they told me 30 minutes in that they're talking about stats that I'm now interested. But even then, I don't like it. I don't click on it. But I go to my browser and open up the podcast, or I mental note for when I go to my podcast app and I'm like, oh, I am listening to this episode of the feed, something like that. Right. So I don't even know that, I think to get engagement, we might need to be doing different things. Like, it can't just be a title of my podcast. Like, if engagement's what you want, right, you gotta ask the question, or, do something that actually asks for engagement or would generate engagement. So the question is, how important is engagement when what you really want them to do is to listen to the episode? And, clicking through browser, people don't listen that way. I do think there's still a lot of value in it. I mean, we all do it, right? You still do it, Effie, right?
Yeah, there's one podcast that I specifically listen to that I see on Twitter. It pops up and it reminds me, and I know to click on it because they're 5-minute episodes, and that's how I get to that particular podcast, because it's quick. It's just one little click. I do go to it for that.
So why? I'm curious why
It
that.
just makes it simple. You know, have you seen those podcasts that are on um like a radio network or like some small town I don't even know what it is exactly, but it's not necessarily I can't find it on my podcast
Mm.
apps. I've looked and I have always wondered, can I not find podcasts because I'm not searching correctly?
Mm.
Or is this why I had such a hard time finding the podcasts I was looking for about rare disease in the beginning? Are people just not in the right spaces
Yeah.
to be found? So I just know I can find it here every week when he posts it, and it's easier than me trying to find it through any of my apps at this point.
Okay.
And it is a tricky thing, right? Because this comes down to producers and how much they know, right? So you might not know to submit your podcast to Spotify, and that might be where, that might be where I listen to all my podcasts. It's not. But um, and we are all learning, right? So most podcasters do not come to this with the savvy to know all the distribution points or all the
Yeah.
things they should be doing to be found. So
Well, and I wonder how much of this is based on what's a broadcast platform versus what's an engagement platform. For example, as much as you can engage on Twitter and Facebook pages, they are mostly broadcast.
Mhm.
You're sending stuff out there, broadcasting to an audience. Similar thing with Instagram. Whereas in Facebook groups and Reddit, in certain subreddits and certain other place, it's more of a conversation. So if you're in a relevant conversational context, I think there could be a lot more engagement with the social posts and potential more engagement with the podcast.
What are your opinions on the Facebook pages for your podcast versus the Facebook groups?
Groups.
Should you have both?
I think
Yeah, wouldn't hurt.
I don't
But
go to your-
groups, the great thing about groups is if you can get them talking to each other, then you can see what's important to them and what's going to resonate in an episode.
I'm not gonna lie, I kind of gave up on Facebook because I had a decent following there and it just didn't show. I mean, it's part of the grind, right? If you don't keep up on it, Facebook
Yeah.
shows less and people just were not getting the content that they said they wanted to get. And it became, I mean, beyond any platform. So for me, Facebook became very frustrating to sort of feed the beast all the time and it seemed like a waste of time. So
Mm.
again, it is what you put into it.
Yeah.
And then I don't know what is the difference? What Effie's asking there. What's the difference between a page for your podcast versus a group for your podcast?
I don't think on pages they have quite as much access to each other.
Right.
What do you mean
I think each other? Like I have a private Facebook group for the School of Podcasting, and they're all making their own posts and talking to each other. And
The people who are following.
yeah. So where I think a page, your listeners could post, "Hey, great episode," blah blah blah. But I don't know that they can make their own post on your page
Mm.
that other people could then, So
They can, but it's buried.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not really.
And I think it also goes back to Facebook not showing everything to everybody. We're in a group. I don't know that, at least not yet, they haven't filtered it. I think everybody sees everything in a group. It's just a matter of going into the group to see it.
Got it.
This is an important element though for your show because it seems really community focused, right? It's around a community of people who have a shared experience. Even like a private page, it could be even a more intimate experience where people really need to find each other and share,
Right.
as opposed to
Mhm.
like a tech show, like where you can get tech stuff anywhere, right? So, um, I don't know how far you've gone into that, but I also wonder how much. I think if you don't find that you are finding those communities already exist and they're done well, then it would be great for you to foster that. I don't
Right.
know, or maybe it's better off that you spent your time in a community that is well established. Like for me to start a page about podcasting would be, I could do it. It would be kind of, it doesn't seem like a good use of my time when there are some really good, massive Facebook pages about podcasting. I could just hang out in that group and
Mhm.
help people. Seems more conducive to growing my show. I don't know what you guys think.
That makes sense.
Yeah, similar thing. If there's a group you can create a group for your podcast, and then that becomes your podcast community's own group, where everyone who joins that, most likely everyone, is familiar with your podcast in some way. But then you can also make a group that's bigger than your podcast. For example, Jess and Elsie of the She podcast have a group. I think it's called the She Podcast group, something like that. But their group really is for women podcasters. So a lot of women podcasters are joining that group, and they're not already familiar with the She podcast. And so Elsie and Jess have a unique opportunity as the owners of that group to be able to highlight their podcast and reach a new audience, because they made the group bigger than the podcast itself. But then again, it's all about, what do you want with your group? Do you want to grow your audience with your group, or do you want to better engage with your audience that you have?
A little bit of both, probably.
Yeah. And if there's already a group for, if you go to make one, like, oh, there's already that one and it's well made and there's a lot of people in it, go ahead and join that and be real friendly with the administrator and maybe see what their story is and see if they want to come on your podcast. And because they're probably likely to share it in your group, or at least it's nice to make friends. And especially if they are the admin of, a couple thousand people in your target market. I'm like, that's not a bad person to know.
Yes.
I
haven't nurtured the page too much, but I've been thinking about the group. So this is really helpful.
In the last paragraph of the article, he says, and of course, if you have a specialized podcast that caters to a highly specific community, which, podcasts do very well, right? Niche content. But I think that's probably Effie's case. It says, spend your time building that community so that the podcast provides a certain value to that community. Use all of the awareness building platforms that bring that community together to keep them posted on your podcast. And I think he goes in a little before that about thinking differently about where these people are and spending your time there. So it does become a question of like, where do I focus my time? Daniel had some automation going on there. So once that's set up, I still think that social awareness, that notification system that social sort of acting as is good, right? I think it's good because, again, you don't know when you're going to reach the one person who really just then tells everyone else.
Right.
Each person matters so much that I think it is valuable. But thinking about it from a time, allocation standpoint, where do I focus? Maybe doing some kind of automation. And does Libsyn will they auto tweet your stuff?
Yep. And to Facebook and to YouTube and to LinkedIn.
All right.
Just an initial post, right?
Right. Yeah. It doesn't repeat it.
Yeah. If you want to take some time and do what Daniel did, Daniel set that all up. Obviously, it was probably a big chunk of work because you had to make all of those connections to each of those episodes and then write something specific, but then it kind of does the work for you. Yeah, you do have to be careful with that too, because I think Dave had one that was spitting out episode.
I was playing with different systems and I forgot to turn one off.
Yeah.
All of a sudden my Twitter just went nuts. And then the other thing is I had it automatically adding tweets each week. Well, after a while, like nobody wants to here's Dave's reflections from Podcast Movement 2017. I'm like, yeah, let's get that out of the rotation. Nobody cares. But in the end, though, for me at least, it always boils down to content. And when I heard Effie's her trailer, and I was like, wow. I'm like, there are some things you just have to share. And that was one that I was just like, that's just it has so many elements of what makes good content. It was vulnerable. It was super specific. It's hyper niche. It's a story. It's got kids laughing in it. What more do you want? And so that's what got me hooked in, not so much the Twitter, and I think that's it. When people find it, that's really where the rubber hit the road. Cause like, okay, Daniel got 6 clicks, but if all 6 of those became subscribers, that adds up. 6 a day is 180. That's 200 people roughly a month, so in the end, if you get them to your content and they go, meh, that's where it gets tricky.
And that is a very good point, that I don't know what those 6 people did, if they're even the same 6 people each day. And because, if they're growing, my audience is growing by 6 a day, that's decent. In a,
Yeah.
in a year, that would be 1,000 people a year, almost more than 1,000. My math is off,
Super valuable.
but I don't know. That's where you'd have to set up extra analytics to track some of that, the event tracking and such, which I do now track.
And
So I could track that.
if you even really need to know it, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
It's one of
if
those
your
things
podcast
that
is
you might-
growing, it's
Yeah,
growing.
you might check it one day and see, oh, cool, that works, or oh, bummer, that doesn't work, and then never check it ever again.
Yeah. There are times when stats look really like I am using a video service now. What got sucked me in is I can see how far somebody watches a video. And I was like, okay, great. Signed up for a year and then realized after a while, I don't really care how far people are watching most of the time. It's like, because I'll do a response. Somebody will ask me a question. A lot of times I will give you a video answer because I talk faster than I type and there's no typos. And so I started using this service, and looking back, I'm like, I could be using Vimeo for this and paying, a fourth of what I'm paying. I'm like, I don't really need that.
Or YouTube for free, and it'll tell you
Yeah.
how long people watch too.
Yeah.
It might be more convenient somewhere else, but I
Yeah.
mean, make unlisted videos and you'll get that same information, right?
Yeah. So
Awesome. Well, since only Effie did the work, we do rely on the guys. to do
Guys,
the work.
come on.
I'm
To
just
my credit, there's a little button. People can't see this button that I see. It says request edit app.
yeah.
Oh,
the-
yeah, yeah.
Edit this document yet.
I only got
Yeah,
mine in
messed
because
up
I had to
there.
bug Ray. I was
I don't
like,
know why. I don't know why that's a problem. So did Effie. I don't understand. I select the. I've been doing. It's 144 rounds of this, people. It's not like.
You
I swear, Google does not want me to be successful. I'm telling you.
I was like, okay, we're all just gonna fly by the seat of our pants today.
Well, I mean,
Got
it
it.
is the round table. So
yeah.
I mean,
Why-
this is what if
why
we all
change
showed
now?
up. If we all showed up at a bar, we'd
Yeah.
have the same conversation. And it's imagine if we had planned to have our conversation at a bar. Hey, you guys want to meet Friday
That would
night
have
at
been
the bar?
amazing.
Yeah, it would be amazing to plan it, or to be meet at a bar.
No, to be there, to be at the bar.
Yes, well, especially now since we have to
Yes.
social distance our barring. But anyways, let's move. Let's go to your other story, Effie. Really, our stories are really just backup stories. If we look, we spent half the show on your one story. We're going to spend the other half on the other story, and we're out of here. It's
What did I put on my other one? Let's see.
The Nielsen launches Grace Note audio on demand for advanced podcast search and discovery. This is a recurring topic here for us on the roundtable.
Well, this is a huge problem that I had. And I think obviously all of us have. Like, why don't podcasts show up when I search it? Like, why doesn't it come up? Why doesn't a keyword disability show up when I'm looking for these podcasts? Somehow I find them 2 years later and they had been going on and they weren't there when I needed them or when I was
Where are you
specifically looking for
when
them.
when they're not popping up, where's this happening?
Well, I've
Or not?
had a Google Pixel now for a couple of years. So when I got that, I didn't know how to listen to podcasts all of a sudden. So I downloaded Pocket Casts because my girlfriend told me it was awesome. So I was searching in there mainly. Sometimes I would Google disability podcast or, whatever the word was for it. And really not a lot came up. When they did come up, they were dead podcasts or I couldn't listen to them for more than 5 seconds because they weren't the audio or whatever it was. But they didn't necessarily come up when I would search for them in my podcast app, which is where I want to do it.
Another potential issue with people where there's no sort of standardized way of doing things, right? You're a producer, you put your podcast on in Pocket Casts. When you put it on Apple, it gets into Pocket Casts. And if you didn't, then if it's not optimized for search, it's not going to pop up. No, but I understand that this is kind of what they're trying to do here. But anyways, do we know more? What is this? What is this thing that Nielsen is trying to do?
Aren't they just transcribing it?
What's that?
Aren't they just transcribing the audio?
Is that what they're doing? I don't know. I did read it, but I didn't understand. Is this a website that people are going to find podcasts? Is it something that a developer has to then integrate into their thing, which we know is not probably going to happen when it comes to Apple? What is it? I read it was just I think it was a press release. This was on Pod News. And
here's what it says. Grace Note Audio on Demand will have standardized podcast titles, descriptions, and imagery. Well, to me, that's half the key right there. When I hear good titles. I tell people all the time.
What is standardized? What are they changing our titles? What does this even mean? I don't
know, but I see a lot of people with really, and I mean really bad titles when it's like, I don't know, Podcasters Roundtable 140.
you can't tweet your way to the number one. You mean something
well,
like
no, but if it was just
optimize,
but if it just said Podcasters Roundtable 144,
yes,
that does not make me want to click on it.
Here's what I think.
What are they doing?
So they're saying standardized podcast titles, descriptions, and imagery. So they're saying standardized these three things across more than 900,000 podcast series. So what I suspect that they're probably going to do is try to intelligently, with both regular expressions and maybe some AI, make the titles be the titles. So instead of like episode number, this, that, season number, all of that, they'll display just the title. And some of that can be easy to do because once you figure out that pattern that people are using for their episode titles, if they're adding anything at the beginning, the end, anything like that, they can easily clean that up. So maybe that's what they're looking at doing, is running all of that through some kind of AI to standardize it so it's easier to see what those podcasts and episodes are about.
Yeah.
Again, where is this? Is this a website I'm going to find these? Which I'll say it's DOA if that's the case. But I got an idea. And I think some people talked about this in our Slack channel, that there isn't a Podcast Roundtable Slack channel. Well, there is, but it's just me, Dave, and Daniel. It's not an open thing you can join when I say that out loud. I saw talk of this on Slack, but I got the impression that it was something that developers would need to integrate. This is Nielsen, right?
Yeah.
Big company. They think that they can bust their way in here and recreate the wheel.
Okay.
I know I get the thing on occasion where I remember somebody had contacted me at Libsyn and said, look, I want to be known for pivot. Like when you type in pivot, I want to come up. And so I looked at the name of their show. The word pivot was not in there. I looked at the titles of their episode. The word pivot was not in there. And their last name was not pivot. So consequently, when you type pivot, nada. That's the three things that Apple searches: the title of your show, the title of your episode, and the author field. And I had somebody today ask me if they could put their name and then a bunch of keywords. And I'm like, if you want to get kicked out, yeah, go right ahead. Have fun with that. So
what do we do? Like Effie's experiencing frustration, right? And finding the podcast she's trying to find. What's the deal? Is this a producer side problem? Is it an app side problem?
I would try maybe an advanced Google search.
But now you're asking her to do she doesn't know. She should be able to just go.
Oh, she should be able to.
And right? Like, where are we missing? That's the question. Is this going to solve it? Is Nielsen going to solve it? Is it an actual problem? We talk about that a lot, right? Is discovery an actual problem that podcasts have? Because everyone takes a shot at it, and then you hear others say, well, discovery's not a problem.
Effie did the right thing. She searched for a topic she was saying. That's the thing that most people don't do, is they don't think to search inside their podcast app or search for a podcast. That the world wants people to just stumble upon a podcast that they'll then subscribe to. And the world just doesn't work that way, really. So I think that, well, like what Effie said when she searched, Effie, you said that the podcasts you found were dead. They had bad quality and stuff like that. That's something that I think is a problem that can be improved. And I think we will see that improve, that podcast apps and directories can very easily prioritize podcasts that are more current than older podcasts. But that comes at the cost of hurting the timeless older content. Like if you do a mini series, let's say we do a 10-part how to podcast mini series podcast, that's 10 episodes, and that's it. That's a standalone podcast. That would then slowly drop in search engine ranking unless you factor in subscriptions and plays. And so I think the ranking for search is going to get better. It needs to, because that's the problem we have. Like right now, Google Google takes that kind of thing into consideration. How old is the content? How many other people have linked to this content? How many people have clicked through and visited this content? Does this content still have authority? That's what we need in podcasting, is really some kind of authority measurement system in the apps.
You missed a vital component of, so they're going to give a popularity score. Okay. So this is Nielsen, right? They measured TV shows and like maybe radio, right? Like big shows, big budgets, right? And it feels like they're going to very skew this against the indie podcaster. So a popularity score improves
Shocking.
search and discoverability capabilities by identifying and surfacing the most popular podcasts in a catalog. That's going to be a
That's
bias. It's going to
annoying.
be an issue. That's going to be a problem, right? Category hierarchy provides 3 levels of categories when classifying series and episodes to enable more engaging and unique discovery experiences. I don't understand a word I just said, so skip that. Here's a good one. Here's a good one. Celebrity links. Oh, it's gonna.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
goodness we're
annoying.
gonna get celebrity links. Allows listeners to identify verified celebrity links across content, providing rich discovery experiences. Thank goodness I'm gonna know which show Carmen Electra is on, because that's the content I needed when I was
Right.
searching for podcasting. Like, this seems very skewed towards big brands.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing, though.
Celebrity links.
With the masses of people out there who have not listened to podcasts yet, what's going to get them to listen to podcasts? Is it going to be any of our shows? Probably not.
It is if they're a podcaster. What are we talking about? They don't care about. they don't
How
care about
dare you?
Joe Rogan.
And the people who do already listen to podcasts
Yeah.
are in the podcast
Yeah.
ecosphere. I think this is a product that they're not going to care about anyway, because when they want a podcast, they open their favorite podcast app and search, or they hear a podcast recommended by someone they already trust and listen to. So I kind of think these discovery things that are being produced, I feel like sometimes we criticize them because we're approaching them from the world that's already inside podcasts, not thinking about everyone who's outside of the podcast bubble. So maybe there is a place for this, and maybe that it will help. Yeah, it won't help the independents, but I don't know that the indies would really have that much of a chance of discovery anyway from someone who's completely new to podcasts.
I mean, I don't know why not. Like, if you were
That's fair.
searching for the content, I mean, Effie wanted to find disability podcasts. Like, I don't care if you have 10 listeners or 100 or 100,000 if it speaks to you. Is my video frozen to everyone else?
It is. And
That's
you
quite a
really
freeze frame. Let me say, what the heck? I'll restart my video and see what's going on. But, it does. If you were trying to create a system that truly helped surface the best podcast you were looking for, I don't think celebrity links and popularity scores, however that's done, is necessarily the way. It just doesn't feel like things are on an even
That's true.
surface.
It's gonna bury it all.
But I mean, if you're a podcaster who wants to learn how to podcast, and you're like, there's probably a podcast for that. I mean, like, it's going to introduce you to something like Alex Blumberg telling you how to tell a story. Like, it had nothing to do about setting up your podcast. I love Alex. I don't get me wrong, but you know what I mean? Like, the most relevant thing it could show you would be one of our shows. And in fact, not just the show itself, a very specific episode, which I just don't see that it has any of that in mind. So
I'm having fun just watching.
I know
Raymond
I'm
talk.
turning this off. It's driving me very. I don't even know how to turn it off. I can do stop.
Well, that's all you need to be a success in podcasting is you need to be a celebrity. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, Dave Jackson is a celebrity that because
No.
of podcasting.
But no, that's the one document that I did put in. And does it count if you put your own document? Is that
We
not?
let you again, dude. We're just at the bar hanging out. We're at a
Right.
campfire. Like, if you got something to say it, man.
Well, no. Well, it kind of ties in with what we're talking about. I had a guy contact me and basically say, well, podcasting, unless you were in the very early days, and unless you're a celebrity, or if you specifically came from TV, you can't break through. And So Ray, how is the Alan Alda podcast? I'm sure you listen, right?
Well, yes, every day.
Do you?
No.
Because that's a science podcast, and you're like
He's a science communicator. But
anybody else? Alan Alda,
yes,
Hawkeye,
Matt.
Yeah.
Hawkeye
Got it.
Pierce from MASH.
Of course.
Anybody just chomping on the bit for the next season of the Amy Schumer podcast? Yeah, so I'm like, it's not the celebrity, and then he also.
However, I will say this
It
about
does help.
the Office Ladies podcast is hosted by two of the ladies who are on The Office, the TV show, together. That is a fantastic podcast. And because they're celebrities from the show, they're able to bring all kinds of insights that no one else can bring. So and they're very good at hosting the show too, by the way.
So really the power of them is not their celebrity, it's the fact that they can give you insight that nobody else could bring.
Right.
Yeah, that's the key there.
Their insight.
Yeah. But the person also said, look, I have good equipment and I'm a good presenter. And I was like, if that's all it took to get, he kept talking about breaking through, then we would all be millionaires because we've all got great, we can almost talk and we have decent equipment. I'm like, that's not it. And then I went and looked at his content, and one episode was about some sort of mushroom. It wasn't like a magic mushroom thing, but it was some sort of gardening thing. And literally the next episode had the word Trump in it. And I just went, well, there's 50% of your audience out the window. And so I just thought it was interesting that he was blaming his timing. He was blaming the fact that he wasn't a celebrity. He was blaming everything else, but nobody wanted to look at your content and go, you know what, maybe I haven't figured out who I'm talking to and what they need to hear. So I just thought it was a really interesting kind of email. And so I worked that into it. And the article, I said, nobody really likes Neapolitan ice cream. When somebody says, what's your favorite? They go, it's always, oh, I love strawberry or chocolate or whatever it is. Nobody says, oh man, hands down, Neapolitan. I can't get enough of strawberry, ice cream, and chocolate put together. Because anytime I ever got that growing up, the strawberry wasn't that good and the chocolate wasn't that good.
That's
Although
you're very controversial here, Dave. You were making it's because again, producer error. What you do is you put it in a very tall glass, you mix it at high speed with a spoon, it turns into the best milkshake you've had. You didn't combine the colors, Dave. That it says it on the box.
How about this as a comparison? Soda. Probably all of us, when we went to the soda machine at a fast food place where we could get our own sodas, back when we used
you're a
to
mixer. You're a soda mixer.
Mix everything together.
Don't do
I always wanted to do that as a kid, and every time I did, I didn't like the result.
Oh yeah, no, it's not a good result. Hey, let me refresh this, but don't say anything because the audio podcast will suffer, and we know that's where our audience is. I'm kidding. If you're watching video, we love you. Let me refresh. If I refresh, let's see if we just crash the whole system here. Not that I need video, but it's really bugging me. So, because video.
There we go.
Oh no, I'm in vertical video. The walls are closing in. I don't know why I felt like I had to.
We were supposed to be quiet.
Yeah.
Well, he's just saying whatever we say now is not going to make it a podcast.
Hard for podcasts.
Don't put any nuggets out.
Things we're not good at.
At least we know.
Go ahead and talk amongst yourselves. Hey, it worked. Oh my gosh. All right.
Nice job.
All right. Neapolitan ice cream. Yeah. Highly controversial, Dave. You're really riding the edge there. We're going to get emails. Look, if that's what it takes to get engagement.
Well, it just goes back to what Effie was saying. When she finds shows and they're like, ugh, like that's my mission in life is to get rid of people going, ugh, when they listen to a podcast for the first time. I mean, we need more right now. We need more listeners than anything.
Never going to happen. Daniel, how many podcasts were added like in the last
month
or something, like insane, right?
Almost 100,000.
in a
Do you think
month.
these are quarantine podcasts that will stay, or
Oh yeah. No, I think they're quarantine podcasts. I don't think they're going to stay very long. I do a show where I look for random podcasts, and I picked some random country and went to comedy, and they were like, I looked at like the top 20 or whatever, and they were all from a certain podcast host that when I clicked on it, there were 2 episodes, 1 episode, 3, and they were all like months. They were all dead. And I was like, what a coinky dink that they were on this host and yet they were all dead.
Well, the interesting thing, so we've had until so if you go to mypodcastreviews.com/stats, I have a new chart on there. If you haven't looked at the page in a while, there's a new chart about in the middle where it's the monthly additions and removals, just showing you how many are added and removed every month. So it's not showing you growth. It's not cumulative. It's every month it resets. And then the last bar is the current month. So it's going to be an increasing number. But we started to see an increase in how many podcasts were being added as far back as October. Like July, August, and September last year all had around 25,000 podcasts added in those months. Then October and November jumped to 32 and 34,000. December, 41,000. January and February were 48 and 49,000. Then March and April are where it starts getting exponential, with April 91,000 podcasts added in April. So yes, the pandemic is certainly resulting in more podcasts. But along with this, and I haven't broken down the math completely, what I was used to seeing on the page is I group active and inactive based on has it published an episode in the last 90 days. And that's the only caveat or only condition I have for what's active versus inactive. That active number used to be just under 40% of all podcasts had released an episode in the last 90 days. It's now 48.24%. So now that is heavily based on so many more podcasts added. Like in the last 90 days, 220,000 podcasts added. But so yeah, what's going to happen in the next 3 months? Well, I think we'll see that activity number drop. But my point is that number has gone up. The active number has gone up. The percentage has gone up along with new podcasts launching. So I think we're going to see more podcasts stay after this than in the past.
Hopefully. If they're good.
Yeah.
It'll make
I had someone on Reddit post a question saying, would you rather have good quality or good content? Oh, I don't like that question.
Isn't it to say isn't good content good quality? No, it's not. But
there is a bar there, because I forget who I was listening to, and they said they listened to a show and the audio was horrible, but the content was so good they stuck around. But it has to be really good content,
and it does, I think, need to improve over time. You will fatigue at some point. You'll be like, I can't take it anymore. Like you might stick the first episode, you hear that, you're like, maybe they had a bad day, right? Maybe the tech didn't work. It happens to all of us. And then it happens again, and then then they don't make a step. So like, he's always talk about like growing as you go. Like hopefully the producer is learning. Like it's good. Start your podcast, find your audience, start learning, but always be improving, like always tweaking. Like it's never going to be perfect, but I think if your audience sees you making steps, like actually giving a heck about your show, it comes through, right? I mean, it is hard if you don't, we're not born audio video producers. So if what you don't know could hurt you, right? You don't realize that it's bad. So I'd take a look at go to My Podcast Reviews, take a look at your reviews. I have seen plenty of reviews that people are like, love the show, just can't listen to it anymore. It sounds like they're in a cave on a telephone. And so, it might give you some idea about what people are saying. I mean, Amazon reviews, I don't go by them solely when I'm going to buy something, but they can be very helpful could be a gotcha that I didn't realize that was very helpful. That even the manufacturer could be like, wow, yeah, we need to fix that. Right. Same for podcasts. Pay attention to what people are saying. And I realize a lot of people say, well, I'm always asking and no one's ever talking or no one's ever giving a response. But there are other places like your reviews where it might expose stuff where people did check in once and they never came back. They weren't going to communicate with you, but they happened to leave that feedback on your review. Maybe, I don't know. It's one place. Maybe where else, Daniel? Where else can you think? You know,
Well, any place that, yeah, people can comment on your podcast. Certainly the places, the podcast review places, but also on Twitter. See if what
right?
people are saying. Search for your podcast name, or if
Oh,
you have
Google Alerts doesn't. I
Yeah.
mean, you're probably
Google
not going to
Alert.
get anything out of that, but
In your if you have a reader like Dave mentioned, I know Reader recently, and so I decided to give it a full trial, and I've fallen in love with I know Reader to replace Feedly, and it's a feed reader app, but it has some searching capacities built into it, like a Google Alerts sort of thing. That's a good place to check too.
Effie, any other questions? I think it's the first time on the roundtable history where we kind of hit the. I mean, we're pretty much at the end, and we hit our articles. We usually have a surplus, but we did a good job of getting through them, and that's how I'm spinning our lack of preparedness. But
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing that I was reading beforehand was all of the events getting moved around and all of the podcast festivals being moved around, and whether or not you think they're going to be made for video, or are people just going to wait it out and, hopefully host them in person? And how do you think that's been affecting podcasting, or has it?
yeah, I don't think it affects podcasting at all. I mean, it affects us who are in the bubble and attend those conferences. And the people who would go are the types that are really dedicated to their shows. I mean, they went to a podcast conference, right? So they're still cranking out content. Maybe a few people who were thinking about starting a podcast couldn't go to an event and they didn't do it. But come on, if that's going to stop you, you probably weren't going to make it past your episode 7 anyways. But I'm sure we'll see. We've probably already seen some version of virtual stuff. I'm sure we'll see other conferences hit virtual at least for once. Have you thought about going to a podcast conference? I'm curious. Is that something you would do? As someone who's not in our bubble, which is podcasts about podcasting, do those appeal to you at all?
Well, I just learned about them. I'm very new to podcasting. I was invited to a few things on my own niche in the rare disease world that have been canceled. But yes, someone in the podcasting world asked me if I was going to something that was like in Florida. And I looked at it and it looked pretty cool. It's basically like going to see you guys for realsies, right? Like I listen to you, I watch your YouTube channel if I have time to actually sit down. But like you guys are in my ear a lot from whatever podcast of yours I'm listening to, mainly this one. But I think there is a lot of value in meeting people in person and hearing people talk about things and having a presentation. I think inspiration from that and word of mouth, right? Like it's me getting my podcast to a lot of other podcasters who talk about podcasting on podcasts. So
Hashtag
yes,
podcast.
I want to go. I want to go sometime.
You should. I mean, I think as a from a producer standpoint, it does a lot for you. It's super motivating. You'll make great connections, great tips, right? Like I don't think it affects the industry so much, but personally, as a podcaster, it can be huge.
What I think I like seeing so many conferences trying to do virtual. And that can work great for the education side of the conference. If that's what you're going to a conference for, is the education, the virtual stuff still works great. In some cases, maybe even better than in-person education. But we don't go to conferences only for the education. We also go for those late nights at the bar talking.
I don't go for the education at all.
Yeah. The best value I've ever received from going to conferences has been in relationships built, fostered, created at those conferences. And you can't get that through the current virtual systems as they exist now. What I think we need a Second Life, a Minecraft,
Look,
virtual reality.
things will return. We'll get to meet in person, and we hope to
Yeah.
see you there next year. Like that'll happen. What they're going to do this year, I don't know. But yes, 100%. I go to hang out with my friends. I go to hang out with the people I listen to. So it's extremely motivating for yourself as a producer. And there are connections. Like you said, you're talking to people who talk about podcasts, who sort of get the word out, right? And like Dave listened to your promo, which I'm gonna have to listen to now, but he thought that was super amazing. So of course he's going to share it, right? So it reaches a certain audience. It doesn't reach the audience you need, but of course, there's probably almost certainly someone who is in your same, who is parenting a child with disability, who then discovers it that way, right? It's always like a channel for discovery. But I think as a producer, like it could really change. Those people who are producing audio that they didn't realize it was bad and it was turning off their audience. Like they're going to learn something. But making that connection to maybe even an editor, someone who can do it for them, could be huge and could be like a thing that changes their whole show because they got them in the right places in front of the right people or gave them a tip. Like, so yeah, if you're motivated enough to go to those because you care that much about your podcast, it's super valuable. And of course, it'll happen again. So I definitely hope to meet you there because
Yes,
you look like you're
same.
in. If you listen to the roundtable, you care a lot about your podcast. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I mean, it's amazing. You guys have helped me a lot. Even if it was just motivation, like I know I get a lot of that from Dave where he's just like, just do it. And I'm like, okay, you know what? If it sucks, I'll quit. I have something else to do anyways. I'm busy.
100%.
So, even just like the smallest bits like that,
Well,
it fuels us. So thank you
need that
guys.
fuel. Right? Episode 20, I'm almost out. And then I get a little boost and I go to episode 30.
Yeah.
The other thing it does is I just had this happen. I was interviewing a guy for my show, and he was explaining how he had like a weird part of his show where he had to kind of go almost on hiatus. And I go, "Oh, what was going on?" He goes, "Oh, I had colon cancer." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's kind of a setback." And so I said, "Well, you have to know Lee Silverstein." And he goes, "No, never heard it." I'm like, "Oh, dude, come on, we have cancer." And I like instantly did a giant plug. And I think this happens a lot at conferences is even if someone isn't a match, if you haven't met your next co-host, it's that somebody knows your show. And when they go, "Oh, wait, you're adopted? Do you listen to Adoptees On?" And they're like, "What's Adoptees On?" And you're like, "Oh, it's this podcast." And then it's just a lot of that. And just the fact that you don't have to explain to anybody what the heck a podcast is it's nice just to go, I can say,
yeah. It's super exciting to be in a room full of people who are just like you.
Yeah.
Like your brain's going to spin so fast because your mouth's going to go a million miles an hour. You're going to come home so exhausted, but in a good way.
But there is an event tomorrow. Podfest, multimediaexpo.com/masterclass.
And Podfest is probably the event she's talking about. That's the Florida event, right?
That's the Florida event. Chris is trying this. Chris is, Chris, he's going to start ugly. And he's like, "Okay, I got this." And he said, "I didn't go after big name speakers. I went after people that could give me strategies and like when you leave after you watching this person, like I do a presentation on different strategies of getting to know your audience." And there were some other things on there. He goes, "So if you're looking for the big names, they're not there." He goes, "But I picked these people because of the content." And so it's free tomorrow. It's from 6 a.m. to I think 5 or something like that. And then if you want to buy the recordings and there's some bonus stuff, it's like $50. So it's not a huge investment. But Chris is just like, let's throw it on the wall and see what happens. So we'll see how many more of those. And then same thing, We Are Podcasts is doing an online thing. So we'll see.
Yeah, when we someday all have virtual headsets and can enter a virtual world,
it still won't be it. It still won't be the same. It won't be enough.
To be able to walk, that's the big thing you miss with even like these Zoom things. You can have breakout sessions in some of these online platforms, but what you miss is that ability to just nicely walk from one conversation to another, bump someone in the hallway, start a new conversation, just two ships passing in the night. That's the kind of thing you just can't get unless you basically replicate everything about real life into a virtual scenario. And that's expensive.
I can
This
send
is
you.
just reminding me of the new season of Westworld that was
There you go.
amazing.
I love 100%. Don't spoil it. I'm almost
I'm
done.
gonna say I haven't started watching yet.
I could send you a
So
cold in a
good.
box, Daniel. I can just sneeze into a box and then maybe you'll get sick and you can go home sick and it'll just be like we met at a
Just like
conference.
Las Vegas.
Yeah, just like Las Vegas.
Oh god,
But
gross.
people do often wonder, like, it's a lot of money. Like that's a lot of output. And like I don't know that you're gonna see that money necessarily just come right back to you, right? I mean, like I I mean, we're a different case. We're podcast by podcast. So a lot of the sessions, don't get me wrong, there's plenty to learn from. And a lot of these have virtual tickets. So my plan is like I'll watch that later. Not that I always do, but
Never.
I'm gonna see Dave and Daniel and we're just gonna talk the whole time. And actually it's a bit of a problem because I don't talk to enough people that I don't know, which I think is key. Like you need to go these things and talk to people you don't know. You might listen to someone's podcast if you haven't talked to them in person. That's fine. Like you don't really know them, so talk to them. But it is hard to get away from just talking to your friends and then realize it's gone. But it is hard to sort of synthesize the value because you spend a lot of money, airfare,
Mhm.
maybe hotel,
Hotel.
conference. Like that's a lot of money to spend. I think it's worth it for me once in a while. It's not an every year thing for me. I go once in a while. As a one-time thing, if you have a podcast, 100% it's worth it because you will be surprised how much you're like, oh my God, that was amazing.
Noted.
But
How-
Dave,
Well, how many episodes do you have at this point?
30. I think this week was my 30th.
nice.
There we go.
It's a good. You're past
Moving
all
right
the
along.
important thresholds. Yeah.
Okay,
Are
so
you producing?
I
weekly-
did.
Are you producing weekly episodes or what's your schedule?
Yes, I release an episode every Thursday.
So are these interviews? Sorry, I didn't listen. Oh yeah, I did listen.
Yeah,
I listened to something because I heard the audio quality was great.
I have a
Very good.
girlfriend that is on with me a couple times here and there. I have interviews. I've had my husband calls them episodes that he thinks I should
nice.
add more to. So I might do some more episodes where I kind of talk about my personal situation a little more. But yeah, mainly I'm letting other people share their stories about, whatever their advocacy is or their rare diseases, just to kind of bring more awareness to the subject.
Yeah, once you capture those people, I think your personal stories will hook probably a lot of people, right? Dave,
Yeah.
that could be a difference
Well,
between
that's
getting
it.
personal is like, or at least from your own perspective.
I
could
do
be huge.
I do a really stupid show called Building a Better Dave, where I just spew about whatever is on my mind. And many times the weirder it is, the more I'm like, yep, that's got to go out. And it has the smallest audience of any podcast I do, but it's also the one that if I go weeks without putting out an episode, because it really is just like, whenever I'll put something out, that's when I start getting emails, when the next Better Dave coming out. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like I did one episode was how I was surprised I actually sprayed shout on something, the stain remover, and I shouted it out, and I was like, holy cow.
Was it your dog Spot and then he was gone? Sorry, that's an old Stephen Wright joke.
But it's because people like want to know it's somewhat reality TV without the TV, and they get to know like you, and they're rooting for you and the whole 9 yards. So yeah,
Well, in the case too, like if someone came and listened to episode 5 of your show, and with interviews, people might cherry pick. So one interview will speak to them, or they'll know the person and they'll listen, and maybe they'll skip a couple and listen to another. But when you start bringing your personal experience, they're going to check in maybe each time. Not only that, they probably decided that they like the way you present the information. So peeling back a little bit more about how you're dealing with it, I think you've already connected with them even without, the episode. Like, so, which amazing. Building a Better Dave, love it. Episodes, love it. So good.
The key with Effie is I just picture that person when they find your podcast, and all of a sudden they're like, I don't know what to do. Nobody knows what I'm talking about. I'm the only person in the world that's going through this. And then they find your show and they're like, wait a minute, there's somebody else. And instantly they're like, okay, I'm not alone. And that is to say I don't feel alone anymore is so underrated.
Plus the feedback. I feel like it would open up more opportunities for feedback, right? People will then feel like, oh my God, I got it. She understands. Like, I'm going to share my story. I'm going to tell her. Or you ask a question, you get more of a response. all just ideas. It is a throw it against the wall and see if it sticks type of thing. I think
Sure.
it's the beauty of the medium. Like the producer, you didn't get 2 million views this week and they shut it down. The network shut it down. Like try it because it will be that thing you don't expect that really resonates. And
Okay.
maybe, it won't be the tweet. It will be the thing you do
Okay.
in your episode, which I think is cool.
Ray, have we
Awesome.
ever done breaking news?
Did it. I don't have a. Go ahead, Dave.
It's this just in. If you've wondered why, because like last night, Apple Podcast was up and down and acting flaky. They just added. Can you guys see what are you guys looking at?
Your screen.
Good. Search the audio beta. Type.
It's not new.
It's not new. Okay. Well, so much the almost not breaking
It's
news.
new to a lot of people.
I don't
right
think
now.
I've seen that tile.
Right now.
See, that's the problem. I don't use Apple Podcasts anymore. I thought that was new.
Wait, what is it? You're telling me it's transcripts. They're searching transcripts.
It says new in Apple Podcasts. Search the audio beta. Type to find topics and people mentioned in the audio. And apparently that's what's now happening in search. So all that thing where they were transcribing things behind the scenes, apparently they're going to start using that. So maybe search won't suck anymore.
That would be awesome.
Right. They're doing top down on that. They announced it in
Top podcast down?
Yeah, top podcast down. 2018, I think, was when they announced it, and then started rolling it out shortly after that. I forget exactly when they rolled it out, but yeah, that has been there for a while. It's not everyone's podcast, but it is cool when it does search the transcription. It's nothing you can control other than what you say in your podcast. And I really hope that they just decide we're going to ignore the first certain percentage of what you say in your podcast so people don't start saying, my guest today is not Zig Ziglar, Pat Flynn, or John Lee Dumas, but he was inspired by Steve Jobs, Thomas Edison, and all these other marketers who help you build your passive income. It's Joe Smith from the garage store next door.
I just want to say that the roundtable can be found every fortnight.
He's broken.
We're in.
Where we help you make $1 million.
Every fortnight. No, I'm sorry. All right. We don't have writers in the show. Sorry. That's what you get. Awesome. I was going to crack open another. Dave, you approached I went to a podcast conference. I didn't find my co-host. A question I hear once in a while, people say, how do I find a co-host? And it always kind of, there's no co-host shopping mall. No. It's an interesting question. I guarantee you guys have got it. Effie, your co-host, you said comes on once in a while. I mean, how does that work? Is it like, are you pulling all the weight? Are you editing too? Are you doing all the work?
No, I told you my amazing sorceresses, Erica and Devana at ModPod Studio.
There you go.
They do all that for me, which is what helped me get going, right? I was planning my podcast for like a year and, I wasn't doing anything until finally I was like, I'm just going to pay someone. And then I had a podcast out in a week.
I was going to ask you, like, who are these? Okay. So you're paying. So, okay. You decided to do a podcast. You thought a little investment was worth it. So that's working for you.
Yeah. I went into a Facebook group that was just full of a bunch of women. And I was like, hey, I would like to find someone to help me edit my podcasts. Please maybe have some sort of connection to someone with a disability. And I got a bunch of answers, and something they said just stuck to me. And, I hired them and I was like, hey, I kind of want my episode out like in 2 weeks. And they were like, no problem. Nice. So they do that part for me. And it just took such a load off, and it made podcasting not stressful, and it made it fun. So I handed that off because I couldn't figure it out to where I was going to be proud of the outcome of the audio. So once I did that, I was like, okay, I can do anything.
So with your co-host, is it a friend?
She's a friend. Yes. She's someone I met who also has a daughter with a rare disease. So I would have her on more. She's just extremely busy. Yeah. We're both so busy. It's hard to connect, at the same time. But when it's on, it's fun. We just kind of gab about, whatever topic that we have going on in our lives. I wish I could talk to her more, but like I said, schedules with kids like ours who are at appointments all the time just doesn't really go together for a schedule.
And I think most co-host situations are born out of friendships, right? Like that tends to be where co-hosts come from. We have co-hosts here, and it was like born out of podcasting in the same niche, right? So I mean, there's an option, right? Who's podcasting in your niche? You'll be surprised how many podcasters have a podcast and are willing to start another one.
So do you recommend having a co-host over being solo on your
It's a
podcast?
great question. Like it does depend, right?
Depends. Yeah, I'm going to say that's one of those depends answers from, because if you're trying to position yourself as an expert, maybe you're a coach of some sort, you know, the co-host is taking all your spotlight. So how do you do that? Or it's good because it kind of comes back, because some people just are like, I can't do a solo show. Well, then get a co-host, because it is weird talking to the wall. But my co-host, Jim, for Ask the Podcast Coach, just asked me one day, goes, it looks like you're struggling, because I was doing a live show. I was testing a bunch of stuff, and I was horrible. I listen to those now. I'm like,
thanks, buddy.
Wow, those are bad. And he goes, do you want me to hop in? And I'm like, yeah. And then he did. And I'm like, I've never had a co-host. And so he stuck. I'm like, hey, do you mind like coming back next week? That made things a whole lot easier, because I'm sitting here running a board and watching a chat room and all this other stuff. And then my other one for the podcast review show, I saw Eric's was writing a blog on the new media or whatever it was. What was that thing that went? It's gone now.
Yeah, new media show.
New Media Expo. Yeah, that's it. And he was writing on the blog, and I saw that and was like, wow, this is really good stuff. And so I met him at Podcast Movement and was like, wow, this guy really knows his stuff. And I said, would you ever be interested in being, a co-host? And he was like, that would be awesome. So, but I found him on a website and then submitted it at the event. But what do you think, Daniel? Solo or co-host? Going back to Effie's question.
It depends on it really depends on a lot of things. What you're most comfortable with, I think, is the most important thing.
Yeah.
My TV show fan podcast, that was fantastic with co-hosts, because we saw different things. We had different theories. We disagreed on things. And it was great. It made for great conversation. It better represented our audience too, by having more people with more opinions. And the very few times, I think literally only a few times out of 350 episodes, did I have to do a solo episode. It was so different. The energy level was so different for it. Comedy too. And the people who do solo comedy shows are tough. That is hard to listen to, even depending on how you do the comedy. So if you can't have a co-host, you could do the John Bell Bats in the Belfry approach and just get really good at other character voices and have a character voice co-host.
Dave has a couple of co-hosts before he thought he had co-hosts. But they're there. Binky and the Wiz.
Good ones.
Yeah,
good one.
Good
They're
ones. Exactly.
my favorite. I mean, quite honestly, if Binky and the Wiz had their own show, that's the one I'd listen to, not Dave's. But
I would have no voice left. Zero.
Well, let me say this. I have two podcasts, probably three, but the one with co-host is the one that still goes on. So, take it for what you will. It can be easier, right? It can be easier to have someone help you do the lift of a podcast during the podcast, before the podcast, after the podcast. But, you have more hands in the pot then. So it can be equally tricky as far as scheduling and all that stuff goes. And where to go to get a co-host, I think it's another roundtable, because I want to find this co-host mall. It exists.
Yeah.
Shop for them. But
I see a lot of people post about it in Facebook groups sometimes, that they want to be a co-host.
Oh my gosh, you guys, we need a dating website for podcast co-hosts.
Yeah, make the app.
You just swipe left or whatever which way for the co-host, and then you find the co-host you like, you swipe up. And
well, I've advised people start your podcast solo, and then so there's something to join. I think make it more attractive, and then once you go a couple months, go, hey, anybody else want to like join me for an episode, and then just start trying them out
from your community that you develop. If you absolutely don't know where to start or find one, start one, see who's out there, see if you click with someone. I mean, it is dating like it's a relationship, right? And it can be tricky, very tricky, especially when you get to the part where you start making money. I mean,
it's a lot like a marriage, so you better get that stuff writing before.
Well, look, we got to end this because I have some coding to do. I got to get that app out before someone else gets it. You guys can come up with a name. We'll call it co-hoster, coaster without an E and an
Without an
R.
E,
Coaster
exactly.
yeah, exactly. Okay, we're good. Awesome. Thank you so much. Let
All
us know
right,
where we can
thanks,
find your
guys.
podcast. Hold on, Effie, you can't leave. If people are still listening, they definitely don't want to know where to find you. So let us know where we can find your podcast, and then we'll get out of here. Effie.
Yes, my podcast is called Once Upon a Gene. You can find it at my website, www.effieparks.com. I'm also on every listening app out there. So check it out.
Gosh.
I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
I'm trying
learning.
not to is it all at Once Upon a Gene?
Yes.
And how is that name working out for you in terms of discovery? So when we think of discovery and not being right, like
we should have talked about this before you had to go.
mean,
What do you think of my name? Is it okay? Yeah,
it's a potential barrier, but not that it can't be overcome, right? What do you guys think? I mean, look, it's hard to pick a name. What are you gonna, it's a clever name, right? But does it tell us what your podcast is about? Not so much.
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't pass. Go ahead.
I have like a little caption under my like logo where it says "Once Upon a Gene: True Stories of Raising Rare Kids." So
I would add that in your title.
Can she? Like without getting kicked out of Apple?
I think so. What do you think, Daniel? Because that's not really keyword stuffing.
It's making the title what exactly?
Once Upon a Gene: raising.
It's
True Stories of Raising. Yeah, it's a long. It makes it long.
But I mean, even that. So what is raising what?
True Stories of Raising Rare Kiddos.
Rare kiddo, but people probably aren't searching rare. Like you only search term in that title that kids, but that's not enough, right? Gene probably not searching for unless they're looking for a specific disorder, I would think, and maybe that's enough. But
well, that's my other thing. I was thinking, how do you like? What's the disorder? And my guess is it's ridiculous to spell.
Sure, and I have a wide net, right? Like I'm not just talking about my son's rare disorder. Yeah. I'm talking to the rare disease community.
Probably good.
So,
like it's already small niche.
Yeah,
I need to make it exponentially smaller. Although, is it a situation where she could speak to her son's disorder and grow out from that, right? To really find the audience.
Yeah.
I don't know how big the community is. And, then we're also talking about people who are searching podcasts for that thing. It's tough.
Yeah.
The key is the episodes, right, Dave? Like if you have episodes that include titles that have disability, have the actual disorder or various disorders
in the title,
it all needs to be in the titles of your episodes. That's how you isn't that a great way to sort of rehab an ambiguous name?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I took that away from one of the episodes that you were on, Daniel, recently, and you kind of harped on the fact of making your title pretty explanatory, and I'm trying to do that now because I was like, duh, why am I not doing that?
Yeah, what you can't do in your show title, you can do more easily across several episode titles.
Right. Okay. I mean, really, when you have if you're starting and you have a podcast like that in your name, like plan out your first 10 episodes to really focus on all those things you want to be found for. I don't know. It sounds a little marketing speak, but it feels right. It feels right to sort of provide, it's almost a search engine optimization. And Daniel is the SEO iTunes guy, podcast guy. So you would know, but he shook his head. Yes. So I'm going to take that as a good sign.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because what are you doing? You're planning relevant content. You're giving the content you want to be known for early on. So yeah, it's the good thing. That's really in my whole SEO course that I do. One of the things I say is SEO needs to change how you create content. And the result is even if your audience doesn't grow, your content gets better by approaching it with an SEO perspective.
And would it do the stats show that people are listening to that first few episodes more than any others? I think I remember old stat where your episode 1 is like your most listened to, but is that just sort of a function of what? I mean, do we know? What is that? We updated that one? That feels old. Episode 1 is ultimately going to have because is it? I don't ever go back to episode 1 as a starting place. So,
well, Effie, since you're 30 episodes in, what is your most popular episode by number of downloads?
It's my third episode that is an episode.
See, we're going back to that theory where the episodes are
Yeah.
interesting.
And it's significantly more downloaded than my other ones.
What's it titled?
Just Effie.
See, now that's bad, but
I know why.
Yeah, well, that was my first day. So I want. Can I change that?
no,
now?
it's working. Oh, you can change
It
it
is
now.
working.
But
You
Daniel
I
has
can.
a theory.
Okay.
And the
I
reason
can add. I can make it more explanatory.
But maybe I'm not going to touch something that's popular.
it's a technical reason why that one's the most popular when it shouldn't be.
Okay.
What is
we
it?
can talk about that later.
Wait, no, you can't leave the PR audience.
Okay.
It's going to kill us.
I noticed this about your podcast, Effie. For some reason, a few of your episodes have a season number attached to them, and the rest of your episodes don't.
So it's
Okay.
putting
I
it
didn't know
up?
that.
Yeah, so those few episodes that have the season number are appearing differently than the rest of your episodes. So when I look up Once Upon a Gene in Apple Podcasts, the episodes that have the season are the top one, Effie. Second one is Effie and Cynthia. Third one is your trailer. Those all have season 1 attached to them. And so they're appearing above everything else because everything else is listed under unknown season. Those do have the episode numbers with them. But
Interesting.
so just go back through your publishing system and remove the season numbers from those, and Apple Podcasts will eventually update. But that's why that one episode is your most popular, is because it's listed at the top.
Makes sense.
Inform your people.
Okay.
Like it's
Good
just
to know. Thank you. I didn't realize that is how it was set up.
Dave, are you looking at your stats? You're going to tell me what episode 1 of the School of Podcasting has like infinitely more episodes than
It probably would.
What I'm
it-
getting at, is it just a function of it being the one that's there the longest? And
Well, that's why I wanted to know from Effie, is because her podcast is much more recent. Whereas Dave's podcast has been around since the dinosaurs.
Before time.
So it's, so his episode 1 is probably always going to be the most popular. And what I want to see, and maybe the audience can chime in through chat or through feedback later, but people who have launched a podcast in the last year, which episode of their show is the most popular if they've been podcasting consistently, like at least weekly?
Yeah, I feel like, at least in my niche, the quarantine has affected my downloads. A lot of parents are home with their kids right now, so they're not necessarily, commuting or whatever.
So you're downloading.
So I don't know if I could answer that without having a more streamlined year that was like real life.
Yeah. Well, plus we got that little technical thing there. So
yeah, and I'm gonna fix that. Thank you for telling me.
But from the audience, it is interesting from Dave.
It's actually not episode 1. Episode 1, 10,691 downloads from October 12, 2005. The one right above it, episode 51, and I think it's because of the better title. We've been talking about that. Titles. The title of episode 51 is "This Headset Sounds Like Ass."
Does it say actual ass in there? Like,
yeah. No asterisks, just that's the title. I'm like, from August 28th, 2006.
Which is funny because like most people
Dang.
aren't looking for headsets. Although maybe back how old your podcast is, headsets were the way to go. And they were the rage.
I think that was the thing. People were going to, because we're trying to get away from the stick microphones, and that had 13,000 downloads. So
wow.
So here's something
crazy.
to think about also with that. 2006. I don't remember when the Association of Downloadable Media was founded, and it influenced. It's like the early version of the IAB guideline for download measurement.
Right.
But Blueberry, Libsyn, and such
That's a good point.
made standards as a result of that. So from 2006, I wonder what percentage of those download numbers are accurately measured.
They're fake numbers, Dave.
That's it.
Well, and I'm not saying fake, but I mean, the download measurement has changed as the industry has changed too. So like in 2006, you didn't have the Apple Watch artificially inflating downloads. That was a short phase that was then fixed.
But were the numbers fixed? Like, would your host reflect the fact, because Libsyn did take those like they extract those bogus numbers for coming from the watch, or was it just didn't count episodes that already happened?
When they
Effie, if you have to
updated,
go, you please run away from us nerding out on. I literally did the outro, and we're still here.
it's the never-ending.
We're gonna wrap
episode.
up. We're gonna wrap up. Dave,
All right.
finish up.
Did
Do we know if Libsyn? So when
I don't think they've gone back to like 2005
retroactive
stats.
stuff. When stats change, do things happen retroactively, or do we then have to
No.
Because in Libsyn they do give you a thing that says pre this year where we
Right.
changed massive the way we count, right?
But yeah, we don't go back to, because that would be
I imagine it'd be wrong, but I mean computers are amazing, so who knows?
Recalculated, yeah. So no.
This is why we need
It's from this point forward.
This is like listening to my husband when he's talking about gaming. I'm just like planning dinner.
Oh man, that is a good cue. We've overstayed our welcome. 100%. We went way too far. All right. Normally time limits don't exist, but when you have guests, they do need to exist. All right, Effie, thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah,
check
thanks,
out,
guys. You're
check out
awesome.
the promo. Dave, it sounds like this is the way to do a promo. So go listen to Effie's promo at onceuponagene.com. And
effieparks.com.
Oh, sorry. Oh, so okay, we won't crack that nut. So you don't have? Do you have like?
Can you guys just send me all the notes I need? Thank you.
Do you have like a .net of the name or anything?
I think I might have actually bought it like a year ago, so I'll double check. Should I be using that instead of Effie Parks?
Once Upon a Gene, I can spell Effie, 1 or 2 F's, EPHIE. It's
okay,
but I know how to spell Once Upon. Even Gene.
I mean, it does depend sometimes if you're gonna branch out and become more of a voice on that space, right? Like,
which is kind of why I started it as Effie Parks, just in case magical things happened, then it would just be me. But could you guys just send me?
Not bad. We'll keep working on it. We will definitely let you go. Daniel J. Lewis, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm Daniel J. Lewis from the audacitytopodcast.com. Check out my recent mini series about labeling podcasters, like pro versus hobbyist and independent versus corporate. The audacitytopodcast.com.
We weave all those lines. Some days I'm a pro. Some days I'm just not. I don't belong here. Dave Jackson, thank you.
And every day I'm a hack. That's it. Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com.
Awesome. Podcastersroundtable.com/guest if you want to join us. If you're a woman, you submit, you might be on the next one, just like Effie. So please do that. I'm going to mix it up here. We'll see you on the next one. And that's it. Wave goodbye. Finally.
Bye, guys.